What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 73 of Nintendo Noise, Flip Screen Games' weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Hi, hello.
Hey, hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. Very excited to be back again talking about some video games. How are you?
Yeah, man, me too. I'm having a pretty good week. Had some time off from work, been doing some projects around the house, got to do some work on my basement. I'm almost done. Got some of the stuff in the background rearranged and everything. I got to put up some art and hang some shelves and stuff, and then I'll finally be back in business after a year since my basement flooded. Year plus.
Living the dream.
Yeah, so I'm having a pretty good week, and I'm excited to get in here and talk about some Nintendo with you this week, Max, because Fire Emblem Engage is right around the corner. We're going to be talking about that quite a bit. And then later on in the show, we're going to get into some questions from you, the listeners, and if we have time for it, I got a little game, because Max, of course, has shown himself to be something of a competitor. When we did name that game, of course, you were I think the first person to ever win Name That Game besides me. So
Reigning champ, they say, actually.
yeah, I think that officially makes you the reigning. You know, the problem is, though, right, because I was the reigning champ and I was the host, we didn't get to go head to head. So now I feel like I'm like the legacy champ. You're the up and coming like people's champ, right? Like, could it be, you know, little David and Goliath Cinderella story to warm your heart? Max comes through, he's the new champion, and I get knocked down a peg. Wouldn't that be nice?
Am I David or Goliath in this situation here?
I'd be Goliath because I'm the reigning champ.
Surely there's so many other boxing metaphors that don't make me teeny tiny and you absolutely giant. Why can't we do like Anthony Joshua or anyone else? I don't know, any other boxing or the YouTubers. Jake Paul's calling out all these big guys. Why can't I be Jake Paul?
You took it to boxing, David and Goliath. That's biblical. You know, it's
I know it's biblical.
It's bigger.
But it just makes you massive and me very lucky with one throw of a stone. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not saying it's luck. If you can come at the champ and win, then you deserve all the flowers in the world, and I'll be the first one to give them to you.
All right, fine.
Okay? Okay, good. So yeah, whenever Steve comes back to the show, whenever that is eventually, we'll have to have him let us go head to head. But so I created a game, only one player, only one winner, right? You can either win or lose. It's all glory, right? So we'll see how that one goes. But let's jump into the Fire Emblem talk, because Game Informer, Wesley LeBlanc specifically at Game Informer, put up a preview of Fire Emblem Engage this week and gave some context that I was pretty excited to get. Because I know you and I talked about this game a little bit off mic, and I don't know, I'm like cautiously optimistic for it. Because and I think like you, right? Three Houses was my first Fire Emblem experience, right? I had never really given the franchise a fair shake prior to that, even though I had always kind of thought it would be for me. I'd had a lot of people tell me that it would speak to me. Three Houses ended up being a game I went into fully expecting to bounce off of it like the way I did with Xenoblade. And I ended up falling in love with it. And it's like one of my favorite games on the Switch. It's one of my favorite JRPGs, you know. It's a game I really, really look back on fondly. So I've been excited by the prospect of a sequel, right? And not necessarily a sequel, but a fresh Fire Emblem on Nintendo Switch. And Engage being, Engage. Thinking of that old
Nokia Engage.
Yeah, the Nokia Fire Emblem Nokia's Engage. It obviously is a little different, right? Because it is kind of like a greatest hits. There's like a, legacy character connection and everything that seems to be a big part of the narrative and kind of the gimmick of the game. And, offline, you made the comment that, like, if you've only played Three Houses, like, how much does that matter to us, right, as new fans? So it felt like kind of a weird choice to follow up Three Houses with a game like this, considering like Three Houses was such an entry point for so many people.
Yeah, I would say this one sort of feels like the Smash Brothers Ultimate of Fire Emblem, but Smash Brothers Ultimate already was
Even more
Smash
so.
Brothers of Fire Emblem. So, but yeah, it does feel like their marketing for this very heavily has been old characters, and that, like we said earlier, what does that really do for us as people that have only ever played Three Houses? Like, cool, they might bring in Edelgar. I can't remember what her name was now.
Edelgard.
And we'd be like, oh, cool, that's Edelgar that we remember from the last game. But what does Marth being in the game do for me as someone who only recognizes Marth from Smash Brothers? And I guess it's quite lucky that Wesley, when we sort of talk about this this preview, he specifically says that for him, Three Houses was his first Fire Emblem. He was worried that maybe it was a one and done thing for him. Because for me, playing Fire Emblem Three Houses, it came out at a time during the Switch's life cycle. Well, specifically that year, 2019, where Nintendo was just like chucking all sorts of things out. Like there was a heavy period from like May through to like September where we had Luigi's Mansion 3, we had Astral Chain, we had Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, like all these different games that maybe I hadn't really played in Marvel Ultimate Alliance, hadn't really played Luigi's Mansion, and I was just sort of picking these games up because they were coming out, they were being well reviewed. And Fire Emblem was one of those ones that grabbed me, and I wonder if now in a time when there isn't like this, I don't have time to be like grabbing all these experimental games because everything else is now going so wild. You know, when I'm now I'm more than just at the period of time I was just playing Switch games. Now I've got a Steam Deck to think about, PC to think about,
Sure.
PS5 to think about. Is this one going to be for me? But yeah, why don't you go in and sort of explain what Wesley was saying?
Yeah, so you gave the context there, right? That it being a similar kind of entry point for Wesley made me really excited based on this preview because Wesley got to play about 10 hours of the game, right? So that's, a good chunk, I think, to get an idea of what it's about, but probably not so big a chunk that you're really getting into the meat of the story yet, considering it, it is a meatier kind of experience. But what Wesley did have to highlight, like, really, I think, stuck out to me in a positive way, right? Like, the gameplay is very much the same, right? Like it's what you should expect if you're familiar with Fire Emblem at all. The big difference is the engage mechanic, which is where you get to basically like it's like a anime power up form type thing, right? Where it's like
Super Saiyan, you go Super Saiyan.
Yeah, right. Like they get their hair changes colors, they get new powers, right? Like if they're a healer, maybe they get team heals. If they're a damage dealer, they're dealing more damage, things like that. The one thing that they kind of connected to that though was unfortunately that seems to have had a bit of a negative impact on the difficulty curve, that it makes the game a lot easier. But of course, there is also the ability for you to kind of not play on the casual play style like Wesley is, where like character deaths are permanent, and that I think will definitely significantly alter, how you look at the difficulty of the game. So that's a way that you can probably kind of circumvent that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like the big thing about that I liked about Three Houses, which I guess is a typical feature of Fire Emblem games, is that permadeath thing. And I
Yeah.
feel like in turning it off, I don't know if it necessarily makes the game any easier battle to battle, which I think Wesley also says, but it just means that you're not, let's say you lose two people in a game, in a match, you're not then in your next match. What's the word I'm looking for? Like match, right, game, round? I don't know. Battle. Your next battle, you're
Skirmish,
not
yeah,
then
battle, whatever.
skirmish. There we go. In your next battle slash skirmish, you're not, you're not Sans your favorite characters. You're not your strategy isn't being buggered up at all. Which it sounds like in this one that's not really an issue anyway because he wasn't really necessarily failing as he goes. So
Yeah, the direct quote here is, that said, I'm still enjoying every battle, be it story-related or more minor skirmishes. I've lost an ally here or there. I've opted to go the casual playstyle, where allies defeated in battle return after I've won because I want to learn more about the various characters I've met, but I haven't lost a mission's primary objective. So, and then I'm hoping the difficulty begins to ramp up here soon, and based on where the story is headed, I imagine it will. So I think, again, that's probably, a byproduct of it being the first 10 hours of a game and that being generally easier, right? I think you could say the same thing about like Persona 5, for example, right? Like the first, about 10 hours of that game are tutorializing things, right? And it is a little more forgiving before it's like, okay, now that you understand the systems a little more intimately, let's throw some more challenge at you. So hopefully that ends up being the case. But the thing I was most pleased to see was that the hub world and social sim elements, which I know were like newer in Three Houses, right? Not to say that there's never been elements like that, but they were definitely like ramped up for Three Houses. And it seems like it's probably a little bit lesser than what we came to expect in Three Houses, because obviously there was like the teaching elements and all of that kind of metagaming
all
and
of the
everything.
characters in all the three things, you could steal people and you could have all sorts of different
Right.
interactions with them, couldn't you?
Yeah, right, exactly. And like that was a core part of the gameplay, right? Like was kind of the loop of you go through a battle, you go back to the school, you teach your classes, you go around and chat with everybody, you do some missions with them, you have lunch, you do whatever. So it seems like some of that is going to be a little bit less. It's going to be more like about just kind of like checking in and chatting, and some of those other mechanics have been pared back a little bit. But it seems like it's still like your central hub where you're going to be able to like get new gear, like hit up shops, chat with your group. There's that like animal adoption mechanic that we saw a little bit earlier, where like there are dogs, cats, sheeps, and birds that you can find out in the world, and then you can like dress them up and interact with them back at your base. You can chat with your teammates and like raise your bonds and make them more effective in battle. There's like the support conversations, which we saw. So it seems like a lot of those features are returning, and just kind of, getting pared back in certain ways and adding some new stuff in others, which seems like a good compromise.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just to sort of talk on my overall feelings about the game, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's all of the preview that I really wanted to add for context. So have at it.
So I feel like while all of that sort of stuff sounds good, I think for me what this game is lacking that Three Houses had was like a strong identity.
Mm.
Where Three Houses was very much like you are in a school, you are a teacher. There are these three main characters who you follow each one of their stories, and you can sort of choose which one you follow, and that aesthetic and that the way that all wove together with all the different mechanics worked so well, and especially when you sort of get to the time skip spoilers and everything changes, and then depending on
You can't say
choices you
spoilers
make,
after the spoiler.
it's been 4 years nearly. That's fine. Um, After all that happens, and like the decisions you made, and the certain characters maybe made different decisions or whatever, that was all very strong. And from what I've seen from the trailers of this, I'm not getting that. All I'm getting is, um, it's. I'd hate to say the word generic, but it feels like it's slightly more generic in a way, but also it's got old Fire Emblem characters, so people are going to be like, "Oh, okay, this is fun because the old Fire Emblem characters." For
Yeah.
me personally, I wish it had that strong identity, and I wish that it wasn't just because when I was reading the thing, it's like, "Oh, you're a character called the Divine Castle, and you've woken up from a slumber after saving the world, and the world's in disarray, and now you're roaming around your own castle," and just like it sounds like more of the setting we've seen before. Whereas I really liked the sort of the school, the sort of Hogwartsy, um, the houses and things like that.
Yeah,
Like that was
yeah.
really
It,
a big
it
part of it for me.
it added a lot of personality
Mhm.
to the world, and I agree with you where I think what has left me feeling a little cold about Engage is that like it feels like its identity is being this kind of greatest hits Fire Emblem type experience. And as a newer fan, right, like I just really wanted a new world and a new cast of characters, and you know
Yeah,
um whatever the next thing was, not like a retrospective like let's look back kind of thing. And
I think we know that Fire Emblem isn't afraid to lean on
history.
its IP, lean on its history. We've seen it in Smash. We've seen it with the Fire Emblem Heroes, the
Sure.
mobile game that was wildly successful for Nintendo for the people that those people that did play it. Um, I think they want to maybe make that happen in the main games.
And I guess I'm torn, because I guess I can see the idea of that, where it's like, okay, like we have all these new people paying attention after Three Houses, like let's expose them to more of the history of Fire Emblem. But I feel like, why don't you just double down and just do something new, right? And just like
Yeah,
keep pushing forward, and let the people that did connect with it, connect with another fresh new world and another fresh new cast of characters. And if
yeah,
like they didn't get in on Three Houses, you could maybe get in on this next one, right? Oh, I heard so much about Three Houses. Let me try this one. Whereas, like,
yeah.
I think a lot of people will look at this, and if they've never played a Fire Emblem, like, I don't think this is the one you jump on with, right? Like,
Because it feels like it's for the fans. It feels like not in a
yeah,
negative way, but it feels like fan service. It feels
yeah,
like
yeah.
you know, uh, you like Marth, here's Marth kind of thing.
It's like
And
you wouldn't
yeah.
play like Hyrule Warriors for like your first Zelda game, right? Like that's a game made for people that already fuck with Zelda.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that Fire Emblem does is it is it's Nintendo's strategy series. It is Nintendo's sort of turn-based strategy. It's the only one it really does other than Advance Wars, even though Advance Wars is essentially just Fire Emblem, but with tanks, just pared down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that just change the setting, and do a different version of what Three Houses was. And I'm sure that's what they're doing here. But all I can see is this thing we keep saying.
Well, but you know what though? I think there might be some merit to that idea though. Like where like I wonder if this isn't a game they're putting out as more of a like we want to put out another Fire Emblem, right? Like because Three Houses drummed up a bunch of interest from new players, and like we want to get another proper Fire Emblem out on Switch. But the game, like I don't know, like imagine that there's a certain amount of pre-production and like thought being put into what the next game. I don't know though, because maybe not. Like maybe we're thinking about this as feeling like more of a spin-off because of the marketing, right? And because of it being like, oh, this is the gimmick and its history. And maybe once we get in there, much like Wesley, we'll find that we're mischaracterizing like what the game actually is. But I'll tell you what, like reading this preview and checking out Game Informer also like put out some videos where it's like Wesley and some of the other people in the crew discussing the game and kind of talking about how it plays mechanically and all that stuff. It is the most interested I think I've been in it since it was like a peak and a fall, right? Where it was like announced and I'm like, oh, new Fire Emblem. And then it's like, oh, this doesn't, I don't know if this is for me. Is this, I don't know, right? Like, let's wait and see more of it. And this was the first real deep dive, right? Like this coverage of it that we've gotten since announcement. So
I think there's been a direct since they announced it, right? It was announced during the same director's Tears of the Kingdom, I think. Oh, this is where I'm wrong, and someone's going to call me out. But
I don't. Yeah, it's tough. It was one of the bigger directs where we saw it again, and I think it was the one that I really responded to, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's kind of whatever."
It was announced during the 13th of September Nintendo Direct. I was right.
Yeah. So
we've run out of time really to have big deep dives.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, and it's like I don't know, like how much do you need to do that? I guess right because it's like Fire Emblem people. Like it's like we've seen it like 2 or 3 times already, right? So it's like okay. Right, like you show it a couple weeks before it's out, like it's imminent now. There's coverage. People are saying it's good. Okay, so I mean, it got me back on the hook for it, right? Where I'm like, I'm back to looking. Not that I wasn't planning on trying it, but like, I think the reservations I had for it were outweighing my excitement for it, not necessarily my interest. Right. But like reading this and reading that Wesley is very much the same kind of fan that we are. Right. Where it's like, hey, I'm a new fan. I loved the social sim elements of the original. And, I was concerned that this wasn't going to be for me. And 10 hours in, it definitely is for me. That's a good sign, I think.
Yeah. Wesley even calls it one of their favorite Switch titles now, which is good because they're a new fan now. They're playing this one, and it's sort of up there for them. So yeah, I feel like that for me, it's coming at a bad time. And I'm not going to have time to sort of or the money to try something that I'm not 100% sure about. When there are other games that I know I am 100% sure about. So yeah, this will be like when the reviews come out, I'll see how I feel. Doesn't matter when I get it. It's never going to be cheaper than it is at launch, is it? So
yeah, you got to just get it when you want to, right? Like that's really the name of the game. But I mean, it's right around the corner here, right? We are 10 days out from it, so it might be the first big game of the year that I mean for anybody, but it might be the first big game that I jump into this year. I think.
Not a Dead Space guy.
No, not a Dead Space guy. No disrespect, but yeah, it is too spooky for me, So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna say I'm remaining cautiously optimistic. The hype is not through the roof yet, but I've also been itching for a game like this for a while. Like I wanted to play Triangle Strategy, and time didn't really allow for it. Advance Wars never came out, so I'm like, I'm hoping that when I jump into this one, it scratches the itch and I bite hard.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple questions in the question block to get into here. But before that, let me remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise has been brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of January. They are, of course, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Mary Berry, Matthew MQC, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the real, still the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to become a Patreon producer like they did and get your name read on the air, or if you want to just become a supporter and get some cool perks and goodies like early access to the show and our special Discord chat and all that stuff, head over to the Patreon. But flipscreen.games is our website where you can head to find links to all of the places that you can find the show and get involved in the community. Join our Discord, right into the show. However you choose to get involved, we greatly appreciate you joining us for another episode of Nintendo Noise. So, let's jump into the question block. This first one comes from one of our Patreon producers, Mr. Zaid Ida, who wrote in and said, "What up, gang? Hope you all had a great holiday if you were celebrating and a great New Year's celebration. Now that we're here in 2023 proper, Nintendo has to be readying up their next console as the Switch enters its 6th year. I'm wondering if they've held off as long as they have because they want to have a library of games ready for whatever their next hardware is called. I'd assume Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is in this camp, but I also have a feeling they decided to go back and optimize some older games in their library. Breath of the Wild, Three Houses, Xenoblade are just a few examples I can think of that could use a small upgrade when the Switch 2 or whatever comes out. What do you guys think? Number one hype man across the board, Zaid. P.S. To my fellow audience members, don't forget to check out the Flip Screen Game Club, where the Phantom Thieves tackle the manipulative scum Madarame in Persona 5 Royal. Don't forget, Persona 5 Royal Game Club Episode 2 is imminent, so make sure you're catching up and beating Madarame and tune into that next episode in just a few days here.
Plugs followed by plugs followed by plugs. It's just all happening.
Yeah, you sandwich right in there. You get a question, and then I sneak another one in. Zayd did the work for me, though. He wrote the plug and everything.
And I commend it. I commend it a lot.
That's why he's the number one hype man. We appreciate it.
For the question, I think I've said this for the last 2 weeks running, really. I just don't think that we're going to see new hardware this year, because I feel like if they were going to do it, Tears of the Kingdom is the time to do it, and we've already sort of seen that. Yeah, we've already seen that OLED console. And I feel like next year, maybe. I think if it's going to be any time, it's going to be next year. I'm also not sure that Nintendo doesn't have a habit with Switch games of going back and optimizing things. You know, we haven't had a Breath of the Wild update in a while. You know, since the first year.
But the question is, right? Like, what does that look like in the context of new hardware? Because initially, when I read this question, I was kind of like, no, I don't know. I don't think they would do that, right? But then you look at how many Wii U games came out on Switch, and it's like, it's not unheard of, right? And they saw a massive amount of success re-releasing Mario Kart 8, right? And I think there's an argument to be made, of course, that the Wii U is not the Switch, right? It sold 13 million units. That software went, I think, probably criminally underplayed, right? So you wanted to bring it to the next generation where, you know, the things are popping off. And I think because of that, I can't see the need for like re-releases or anything like that, because I also think that whatever the next hardware is, I think it probably will be backwards compatible.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, right. And I think they've talked about not wanting to segment the audience too much, and like wanting to see the Switch as like a 10-year platform, and, you know, wanting to have the transition between hardware generations be more seamless this time around. I think having it be something that is more akin to the jump from like the PS4 to the PS5 or the Xbox One to the Xbox Series consoles, right? Like where it's like, yes, this is the next generation. It's bigger, it's badder, it runs better, you know, it's faster, all that good stuff. But like your account is going to come with you. Your software library is going to come with you. And I think rather than there being kind of like, you know, like next gen updates or something like that, like Zayd is suggesting here, I think it'll be more akin to what you saw between, say, like the 3DS and the new 3DS, right? Where like, yes, the games that you played on Switch will run better on, we'll just call it Switch 2 for the sake of simplicity. They will run better on Switch 2, but I doubt it will be like formal re-releases or formal like, oh, here's a next-gen optimization patch or something like that. Frankly, I hope that happens. I hope you're right, but it feels too modern for Nintendo.
It feels too modern. It feels too free. The
Yeah.
reason those Wii U games were re-released in the way they were is because they then came out at $60 again, despite them being, a few years old at this point. They didn't sell very well, and that makes sense because the Wii U didn't sell very well. But it's not like they were re-releasing these games and going like, "Hey guys, you already own this game, even if you own it digitally. Here's like the updated version." No, you were buying a new game, and I don't think that Nintendo is going to do that with a sort of Switch successor. However, you are right in that put the Breath of the Wild cartridge in your Switch 2, whatever they're going to call it, and similar to the way that you can load Breath of the Wild on into an emulator, and it plays better on that emulator, doesn't necessarily mean that that hardware has been optimized, or that emulator has been specifically tailored to make that game run better on your hardware. It just runs better because the hardware is more powerful.
Right.
And I wonder if the Switch is capable of doing that anyway. You just put the game in and it runs better.
I would think so. I mean, shoot, like I even had that experience on my Steam Deck this year, right? Where like going back and playing some like emulating some old games, right? Like I played Tony Hawk's Underground to completion on the Steam Deck, and it ran as if it were a kind of like remastered port, where it's like, yeah, they didn't like change the graphics, but everything looks a little sharper, right? It runs a little smoother. Loading times are like non-existent because it was optimized for the PS2, and the thing I'm playing it on is probably 1,000 times more powerful, right? So
yeah,
I think you're on to something, Zaid, in terms of like this being a reality that the software will run better. But I don't think it's because Nintendo is trying to make like a Microsoft X-esque push where they're like, oh, no, like, oh, you didn't play X last generation game? Well, now you can play it as if it were a brand new game, right? Like, I think it was Steve did it, but I think you did too with Prey, right? Where it's like neither of you had played it, and then you played it on current gen hardware, and it's like, oh, it's like a brand new game, right? It runs 4K 60 FPS, and that's not because the developers had to patch it; it's because the hardware did the work. And
I remember when the PS5 still. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're good. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember when the PS5 first launched. One of the sort of books I'd bought mine and was just waiting for it to arrive, so I was like absorbing all the content I could. And one of them was, oh, interestingly, you put Sekiro into your PS5, and all of a sudden it runs at 60 FPS, whereas before it was locked to 30 on the previous consoles. And they didn't patch it to do that. It just did it.
They just unlocked it, probably.
Just unlocked it, yeah. Which wasn't the case on previous hardware. It was locked at 30, and considering Bloodborne still locked at 30, you might think that's something they built into it. But no, you literally put the disc in the PS5. All of a sudden, you're playing Sekiro at the frame rate it's supposed to be played at.
Yeah, and I think that kind of thing will definitely be likely. Although, in terms of like talking about the new hardware, I'm inclined to agree with you, where I think if they're not going to release it alongside Tears of the Kingdom, it's not happening this year, and it's not impossible that it will come out next to Tears of the Kingdom, and we haven't just haven't heard about it yet, right? Like, is that likely? Absolutely not. But if you think about the Switch timeline, right? We had heard about the NX, right, for a while. The Switch was revealed in December, and then it was on sale in March. So I think that window is quickly closing, but it's literally not impossible for it to happen this year. But I think, to your point, I think it's a lot more likely that Tears of the Kingdom represents the last major piece of software on the Switch, and they're going to ride this wave for all that it's worth. And then we get an announcement for the successor later in the year after the hype's died down and they've sold their special edition consoles and they made it through Black Friday and all that, right? And then it's like maybe at the Game Awards or something like that, or like they do another event and they're like, hey, this is happening and we're going to talk to you more about it in January or whatever. Like that seems to be the trajectory we're on at this point, which surprises the hell out of me, right? I really thought by this point we would be there, but
Yeah, I did too, and I thought that the OLED, when it was first announced, would be that next step. And while the OLED is great, and it really did do a lot of work to bring me back to playing the Switch, it's not the sort of what I was expecting. Can I quickly correct your timeline, just for prediction's sake? The NX was sort of like talked about rumor. Then they said, "Oh, we're revealing something." In October, they revealed the Switch as the Switch. January, they had the deep dive.
yes.
Then it came out in March.
Apologies.
Right? So let's say
You're right.
Let's say
there's
we've
one
got,
more event on that timeline that I'm remembering.
Yeah, so it was October, January, and March, right? So that's about 6 months, right? So it could even be something they reveal in let's say they give Tears of the Kingdom some space. If they reveal it this year in August, let's say, we're still looking at next year, whatever happens, right? And I don't see them revealing it before Tears of the Kingdom, because all you do then is you get people not buying a Switch to buy Tears of the Kingdom. They wait 6 or 7
And
months.
that's why I don't think it's coming. That's why I don't think we'll even get a mention of it this year until after Black Friday. Because I think that in the same way, like you said, you don't want to kneecap Tears of the Kingdom by being like, hey, you could play it on better hardware a year from now. You also don't want to limit the sales of the highly, like, we talked about this last week, right? I remember when you, Sierra, and I were talking about new hardware, and like I think the reason that we're not hearing about it is because people are still buying the Switch like crazy, and like they're the Switch outsold the PS5 last week, I think it was, just because like people are still hot for this thing, and there are lots of people that are still getting into it now and that aren't like counting frames and caring about this stuff, and maybe they don't own a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, and like they're not thinking about it that way. And I think
now they see there's no backlog for them. That's true. There was a backlog for them. It doesn't seem like it's going to get any cheaper anytime soon. People are always just having that moment. People I know are going, well, I'll just go to Switch now because it's not going to have the price drop. The game's not getting any cheaper.
Yep.
What's the difference between me buying it now and buying it down the line?
Yeah, exactly. So and I think a lot of people will grab it either in anticipation of Tears of the Kingdom or with Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of people will get it as a Christmas gift that year alongside Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of families will buy a second Switch, So I think that's where we're at, right? Is like they're gonna ride the wave literally as long as they can, and I think through the end of this year is probably as long as goes, right? And I think that's why we're not hearing about new hardware or software, right? We don't know what's coming after Tears of the Kingdom in a significant way, and I think there's a reason for that, And like they're focusing energy in other places right now too, right? Like it's like think about how much of the marketing oxygen has gone to things like the theme park or the Mario movie and things that are like not about video games, because they're like, yeah, I think Zaid's right. They're holding their cards close to their chest so that when it is time to reveal the successor to the Switch, they can do the same thing they did with the Switch and have a big event and be like, we're making a Switch 2. Metroid Prime 4 is a launch title. There's a sequel to Mario Odyssey or the successor to Mario Odyssey. And here's, whatever, right? The same kind of thing that they did and blow it out and be like, let's brag about all the stuff we have in development. And it's all in the next 6 months or the next 12 months or the next 18 months. I think you're right about that, Zaid. I think that's what they're gearing up for. They're preparing a war chest.
I don't know. Metro Prime 4 isn't being held for the new hardware.
I think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be what we thought. Well, I guess it depends. On the what we know.
Patiently wait.
I'll say this: I could see Metroid being what we are thinking Breath of the Wild was supposed to be, or Tears of the Kingdom, right? Where it's like it's the cross generation game or something like that. Maybe.
I would like to not, for the next 50 weeks, talk about the Switch Successor
ever again.
Time.
Yeah.
No, not ever again. I don't want to spend every single week talking about this thing until we hear anything. I'm happy to have a question about it now. This is for everyone listening. I don't want to have to discuss this every week because I have nothing more to add until they announce it. All right. I'm just gonna, next time it comes up, arms crossed, silent, just so everyone knows.
I mean, please. We get so many episodes as it comes up and we're like, 20 minutes on it. Let's talk about it again.
just me going, as I said previously.
So here's the thing, Max. You're going to have to answer this in the next question. This one comes from Alopius, another one of our Patreon supporters, who said, Hi guys, love the show, and I've had two thoughts on my mind for the next-gen console. Number one, there have been rumors about a mid-gen refresh of the Switch coming out in 2023 or 2024. What would be the key factors to you that defines a mid-gen refresh versus a next-gen Switch? I think the difference is, right, like, I think you need to look no further than the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X as an example. A mid-gen refresh is the same hardware platform with, maybe updated power, faster load times, things like that, right? Quality of life changes, including things like, maybe like supporting better refresh rates, things like that, sure. More storage, I think we got that with the OLED. I think the OLED represents the mid-gen quality of life improvement. It has a better screen, better battery life, all those things, right? The only thing that's different is that it didn't improve performance in the way that I think we wanted it to.
But it did refresh, to use it that way, the games that we played. I pick up a game, and when I was playing Monster Hunter Rise with my friends, they both had old Switches, and I had the OLED Switch, and it's a night and day difference what just that extra inch does.
Metroid Dread looked like incredible on it.
I never played on the old hardware, but it looked, having having also played some of Dread on the Steam Deck, it looks far and away better on the OLED, even though it sort of probably performs roughly the same, maybe a little bit better on the Steam Deck because it's more powerful hardware. But just having those deep blacks and that crisp screen, it's just so bright and vibrant. It just elevates it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a nice hardware refresh. But I think when you talk about next gen, right? And again, to make like a clear line in the sand, I think the difference is you have exclusive content, right? Like you have games, and not necessarily like one-to-one, right? Because it's like you look at like the PlayStation 5, for example, and you've had plenty of first-party games that have been cross-released across, PS4, PS5. But like the PS5 represents a new hardware SKU in a way that is like clear and measurable, right? And I think when we get what the successor is to the Switch, there's going to be a point, right, where it's like, okay, there are games running on the Switch too that could never run on the Nintendo Switch, right? And like that's the difference maker. That is not the case with mid-generation refreshes 9 times out of 10, right? Maybe there are games that run, poorly on the launch version compared to the Pro version. Looking at you, Cyberpunk, but it's not a different hardware platform. It's just a sharper version of that hardware platform, right? New OS, that's another thing, right? Like the OS is the same, right? Your account is completely the same. There's those kinds of things that when we hit that next gen, quote unquote, it's going to be a clear break to some degree.
Yeah, I think for me, the PS5 still sort of feels like the PS4 Pro, other than the controller, because while there's all this talk of like blazing fast SSD and stuff like this, when I play games that were supposed to take advantage of that, which are exclusive, like Ratchet and Clank, I didn't feel when I was playing that game, this is a next gen experience. I thought,
ooh,
all right, cool.
I disagree about that. Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I totally disagree.
I feel like the sort of putting yourself through the port into the other thing was a clever trick. Sorry, was good, but you could have possibly used a clever trick to get that working on PS4. Not necessarily exactly as it is. This is just my personal thoughts.
Yeah.
But I mean, I also wasn't that hot on the new Ratchet and Clank anyway, so whatever.
Which is reasonable. I don't think it was the most exceptional game, but I thought it was a really, really special game that was well designed. But I think particularly the ability to move through those environments so quickly without any load times, that's something that feels truly next gen to me. Because I think what I feel like is going to be the thing that we look at in terms of like when this generation is done and dusted, right? And like what was the differentiator? Quality of life is one of the bigger things. It is load times. It is better frame rates. It is things like that. But I also think it's like density of environments and ability to move from space to space seamlessly like that. Like those are things that I think don't give you the same wow factor as some of the previous generational jumps that we've experienced in our lifetime. But I also think that that's going to be the case more and more as we get older, and that like the jump between the PS5 to the PS6 will feel less less exciting than the jump from the 4 to the 5 and the 6 to the 7. And it's because, like, at a certain point, you know, games can only get so, detailed and so realistic before I think it becomes.
This is what they said in the PS2 era. They were like, "How can it get better than this?"
No, and it's not to say that it can't, but I think it becomes cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And like I think we're gonna get to a point where we're like, okay, like yeah, we can make games bigger and better and whatever. But it's like there was a tweet from Jason Schreier recently where he's like, the development cycles on big AAA games have gotten so long that a new game that gets started development now would come out on the PlayStation 6, right? Because games take like 6, 7, 8 years of development now sometimes. And I think we're gonna get to a point where it's diminishing returns, right? And I think we're already reaching that point where it's like there are so many people who I think share the opinion that you have, where it's like, oh, it doesn't really feel like next gen, like it just kind of feels like more of the same, or that it's like we got like an upgrade of what we were already doing, and I think like that. I think that that as a phenomenon is probably going to be something we have to get used to, because I think it is going to feel more iterative and less like NES to Super Nintendo, right?
It didn't feel iterative at the very beginning of the PS5. I'm talking because the first game I played on it was Demon Souls. Wow, I was like, this is like no game has looked like this before.
Sure.
And then sort of within that next 6 months, we had Ratchet and Clank and then Returnal release. Returnal for me, I was like, the particle effects here are incredible. Like it runs so smoothly. Like this is great. This is sort of like enough of a leap for me. And then it stopped, and they're all cross-gen games. And
Sure.
the stuff that I'm seeing in God of War and PS5, I'm like, this is incredible. It's incredible. But that's not down to the hardware. That's down to Santa Monica as a developer, because that game runs on PS4 and probably runs very well on PS4.
And that's, I think, the thing that's so interesting about like where we're at with the Switch. I think Tears of the Kingdom is going to be like the thing to show it, right? Is that going to be a game that comes out and they're like, hey, we know this hardware so intimately that we know how to take advantage of it to make it look better than it quote unquote should, right? Or is this going to be another game where we're like, man, like this game is so special, but I wish it wasn't stuck on this hardware?
I can't think of any sort of Switch release in the past year, maybe 2 years at a stretch, where I've gone, wow, like when Mario Odyssey came out, or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out, right? Where I was like, this is, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 60 FPS lock, 60 FPS in two-player mode. That was new. I was like, wow, they've really taken advantage of this new hardware. Mario Odyssey, I was like, this looks incredible. It never drops a frame. It's really detailed for a Mario game. Really, really good. And then sort of a lot of the games since then have been like, okay, this is sort of like Astral Chain. I was like, all right, this is fine. It's not perfect. Luigi's Mansion 3 is probably the last game that made me go, wow, like they're actually getting impressive stuff out of this hardware. Monster Hunter Rise I was impressed with, but not to the same degree, because it is still sort of locked at 30 FPS. But I feel like a lot of the games that come out recently, like Mario and Rabbids,
Kingdom Battle.
no, the new one.
Oh,
Stars of the something, Sparks of Hope. That is every now and again will sort of drop frames and stuff, and it's sort of like not bad. I think Bayonetta got sort of an issue with performance as well. I
that
remember
was
when,
one, where it felt like the hardware was limiting its performance.
Yeah, the Warriors, the Zelda Warriors game, the newer one, the second one, that again was like one that performed quite poorly, which is quite surprising.
It struggled with like how many models were on screen, things like that.
Yeah, and I'm worried that we're going to have Tears of the Kingdom launch, and it's going to be similar to Breath of the Wild, where there are compromises to be made, and while they are in the most of them out, there are still compromises to be made. Playing Breath of the Wild on the Switch,
I'm afraid that it's gonna have a sophomore slump moment. I really am, and I don't know. Like afraid is maybe dramatic, because it's like I also have an immense amount of confidence in that team to deliver something great.
Yeah,
but it's like I wouldn't be surprised if it had a Horizon moment where it's like, oh, okay, it's more of the thing we already like, but I already know that, and it's like 5 years later, am I as excited about more of something that I already got? And that's the challenge they have, is to up the ante, right? And it's like, I don't know what that looks like. But anyway, number 2. Nintendo likes to change up their consoles with some quirky features, and the more I think about it, the more I can see Nintendo making their next gen console with VR. The company has history with the Virtual Boy, then the motion tracking Wiimotes, Joy-Cons, Labo, and Breath of the Wild VR. Also, many Switch adverts had people taking their console to the skate park, camping, etc. Though not always realistic, it seems like Nintendo wishes their customers would get up and move more, making VR a step in this direction. What do you think? Is it likely that Nintendo would do this, and can you see a Nintendo version lower spec VR headset being successful? Thanks, Alopius.
I hate to be the no guy on this podcast, which I seem to do a lot, but no. I don't think that it is possible. I mean, having played the VR, the Labo VR, which was shockingly bad. It was fun. But it was bad. It was like you show it to someone, they'd be like, "Damn, that's awful, right?" And you're like, "Yeah, like, I feel really sick." You feel sick, but like, yeah, there's no next gen hardware they can make that would make a serviceable VR. It's not just about the game being able to run better. It also requires like 4K screens for each eye. You're going to want both those screens to be running at a decent frame rate, right? What you don't want is a 1080p device strapped to your face, running at 30 FPS, chugging along playing whatever games that it can even muster at that. I don't think there's any way that Nintendo could do VR again. And I think that I'm pretty sure when the guys that were designing and shipping the Labo VR, they were probably like, "This is awful, isn't it?" They're all just laughing at each other because there's no way that someone put Breath of the Wild on their face and went, "What a fun time I'm having! What a wonderful and enjoyable experience this is."
So
Holding this to my face with the Joy-Cons like that.
yeah, that's for sure. So I think this is an interesting question because I am inclined to agree with you for a few reasons. But I think the points that Alopius makes here actually are pretty compelling. I think, here's what I'll say. I think if Nintendo were ever to make a VR-based console again, I think it would be a while from now. Because I think the idea that what you've identified here, right? The idea that like Nintendo likes to make things that are immersive and about like getting up and interacting with the hardware more. I think you're right. VR is a natural choice for that. And Nintendo has been developing, motion-based controllers and tracking and all that stuff longer than anybody, right? And like they do have a good leg up in that way. So I think what you're identifying here, it makes a lot of sense. But I think with where we're at with VR, I think if Nintendo was to have done this, they would have had to do it before now or years from now, right? Like, and I'm talking maybe decades from now, because I think VR has proven itself to be a niche product. And I don't know that that's permanent, right? Because I think, there are lots of different kinds of hardware, right, that begin as enthusiast tech, and then as it becomes cheaper and more accessible and better, more people check it out. Look no further than video games, right? If you're a longtime listener, you've probably heard the story once or twice about how Steve's father, right, is a old school gamer, right? And he used to fucking sit and get codes from magazines and input the code line by line for hours with his wife's help just to get a simple game to run on a Commodore 64 or whatever, right? Probably even older than that now that I'm thinking about it. And that type of person, right, was rare. The type of person that's like, yeah, I'm going to go through the trouble to do all this crap to play a video game, or I'm going to shell out a lot of money to buy Pong and have one video game in my house, right? Like, it was an enthusiast thing. It was a thing for, the privileged few or folks that were really, really into technology. And I think that's what VR has proven itself to be, right? If you were a Gen 1 adopter, I think there were a lot of people like me who like got swept up in the initial hype of VR and were like, this feels like a step forward. This is a new way to play. This is going to be a thing that 5-10 years from now is like a whole new SKU that we really seriously consider in the way that you think about handheld and home console and PC, right? And it wasn't that. It clearly wasn't that. And I think there are a lot of people that stuck around. There's a lot of people that have jumped on. But I think it's shown that there is not this huge, dedicated, hardcore audience of people that are going to show up for VR experiences like that. And I think when you add that to all of the hardware difficulties and struggles that Max identified, and then you add on the additional layer of the fact that a lot of VR hardware is kind of sensitive, right? It's like it's not something that is super child friendly, right? That you can toss it around and that it can, survive getting dropped down the stairs or something like that. And not to mention the fact that VR is not super friendly for children anyway, right? Because there's a lot of, it's like, maybe don't have kids use it because it can mess with their eyes. It can make, it makes people sick, all that stuff. Those are all things that I think Nintendo doesn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And, if we get 30, years from now, right, and VR is like every person in the world owns a VR headset and it's a seamless experience to pick it up and pop it on your face and it just works and the tracking works and nobody gets sick and it's like ubiquitous technology. And then Nintendo comes out and is like, okay, now we're going to innovate and up the game and do something like no one's ever done before or whatever. I could see that, but I don't know. Like, I think they recognize that it is not consumer friendly in its current state. And that's Nintendo's whole bag, right? It's like, it's not about cutting edge. It's not about pushing boundaries of like technology that other people are already engaged with, right? It's to them, they want to come up with what the new thing is that only they can come up with. And I think VR is just not that, right? They made their play at it way too early. And I think they're probably like, we're good.
Yeah. I think the like you said about how when you can put it on, people can be amazed by it and like it becomes its own thing. I feel like the Quest 2 is that device. It is the you buy it for $400 pounds, whatever that is.
Sure.
You put it on someone's head, and I've done this myself. You put it on someone's head, and you go, just do the little thing. Like my dad, when I first put it on his head, I did. He hasn't played a game since the PS1. And he immediately was just like, shoot, I know what I'm doing. Like it makes sense.
It's intuitive.
You go to someone and say, then you would go to someone and say, oh, I tried this VR headset on, it was really cool. And then that sort of the word of mouth of that is then like, oh, I tried VR, it's very cool. It's amazing what this technology does. If you're Nintendo and you're putting out what can only be a subpar version of that, and you go, oh, try this, and they try it, and they go, well, this isn't very good. I was expecting more, and then that becomes the word of mouth. Well, VR is quite grainy.
Or to your point, if they want to match that experience, it has to be expensive, right? Like, look at the conversation around the PSVR 2, and it's like, oh, it costs the same as the console. It's like, yeah, that's what a VR system costs, right? And like the Switch costs $300, right? Like it new with a game.
And that PSVR 2 system is being powered by the PS5. This, if Nintendo were to do a sort of a handset, a VR headset, it would have to be powered by the Switch, right? So it would either have to be or whatever the console was at the time, it would either have to be plugged into something and locked in, which isn't the sort of the idea of getting up and sort of moving more and stuff like that. It would have to be an all-in-one unit, right? And I don't think that Nintendo are capable of doing that. If Sony have to have it plugged into the PS5, then I don't think they're capable of it.
Well, and at least not now, right? Like, or not
exactly.
at a price point that they'd be interested in creating it, And I think until we hit that point, I don't see them getting into the race.
Yeah. What is it? Elopius? Is that the
Elopius?
Yeah. So Elopius said they make a great point about how people take it to the skate park, camping, and that Nintendo want their customers to get up and move more and engage with games in different ways, right? I think there was an old Reggie quote about VR where it's counterintuitive, right? The Wii is designed to get families playing. Everyone's playing Wii Sports together. Everyone's playing Switch Sports together. You're moving, but you're moving together. VR it can only ever be you're in there by yourself.
Unless you own several headsets, which again,
exactly, yeah.
And again, I think that's something that they might eventually do, but I think it would have to be to a point where it's like, okay, like, here we are. And now VR headsets cost nothing to make, so we can package in 2 of them, and you could buy 2 more, and then like it would have to be something like that,
Yeah.
And that's why I think the most interesting future of VR is going to be in things like theme parks, right? Where it's like it's an immersive experience that you can go buy in, and it's like, okay, this is sort of what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like I had I went to Disney World last year, and I went on the Avatar ride that they have. It's called Flights of Passage, and it's like that kind of. It's not a VR thing, but it's like AR, and you're like on a machine, right? That like simulates you riding on the back of one of the flying animals from Avatar. I don't remember. And
You have to plug your hair into it to make it work.
yes.
Yeah.
But and it's like you have that sense of like it's that 4D immersive experience where there's a big screen and they're like moving you as you're and you're like kind of suspended in the air. Like I think it's going to be shit like that where you really get mileage out of VR of like let's be in a space that is built for you to be in VR, and you can have 10, 5, 10, 20 people playing a game at the same time, and not everybody, because it's like otherwise you're never going to get to that point. Because it's like there was like that Star Trek game. It was like the holodeck, right? And it was like the cool way to play it was for you and all your buddies to get together in one space with multiple VR headsets and play as the different. And it's like, what do you think?
Shout things out to each other.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, that's. Unless you have 3 other friends that invested in $1,000+ PC and a multi-$100 headset, like nobody's doing that, And like, I think that there's so many barriers of entry right now still to VR, and I think we're a ways off from it not being something that is just so like, it's so off-putting, I think, to the average person. Let alone the fact that once you start using it, there's a pretty decent chance you're going to get sick.
Yeah. But do you think we are closer to that dream? You said about the holodeck dream, because me and a friend have been in the same room playing golf together, right? But in our
That's
own
great.
VR headsets, right? We did it and it only cost us, the cost of entry at the time was £300, right? It has become a cheaper thing. It has become something that is more affordable. And I guess maybe as you sort of get to an age where you're working at a point in your career where you can start, buying things like that, right? But there's no way that I would, if I had a child, that I would buy. Let's say I had 2 children, I'm not buying them 2 VR headsets to play a game together. When I could have 1 Switch and play between them.
I think until we get to a point where it makes sense that like a family of 4 would have 4 VR sets in their home, right? To play games or to watch movies or whatever, to do experiences together. That's when Nintendo's gonna make a play, All right, so we're gonna wrap this up on one last question here from Andrew Valentine over from the Discord, and we're gonna save our game for next week because we're going a little long on this one, so we'll save that for when Steve's back, and maybe we'll have a couple contestants. So this one, the new NYXI Wizard joycons have been getting a lot of attention online. What are your favorite third-party Switch controllers / weird accessories? So I did want to talk about these a little bit. They're pretty interesting. I saw them making the rounds today. And apologies. I'm going to do my best to show this to you kids on YouTube, but my Stream Deck software got updated and all of my presets are broken. So
there's no way you wouldn't have seen it by now. It's been everywhere. I think IGN's posted about it.
Yeah,
4
there
times.
we go. So our faces are all messed up, but you can see it now. So it's called like a joypad, and it's like basically a one of the Joy-Con kind of like bases, and it's got 2 like GameCube ends on it, right? And rather than like the tiny little C-stick nub, that's like a proper full-sized stick, and then but it does have like the grooves still. So you can do your little clicky grooves on it like the original C-stick. And then we've got like our added switch buttons, right? Our share button, our home button, all that good stuff. So this is getting a lot of attention today. I think reasonably so because it looks pretty cool. What do you think about this, Max?
I think it looks like they took the concept of the Hori Split Pad Pro,
yes,
which I have 50% of it in my hand right here, and they just seem to have improved on it quite a lot by making it so that you can use it as your Pro controller as well. I think calling it a GameCube controller. Actually, I think I used to look at this before I speak out of turn. Actually, I've completely forgotten. Um, but I'm pretty sure. Is it are the buttons all like the A, B, X, Y where they're supposed to be? Oh, they are. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Then yeah, that's great. I think that it gives the Switch a nice size. I think that the fact that it is, like you say, a base station
Oh,
as
it has
well is
back
great.
buttons too. I didn't realize that.
It sort of does it all, and I feel like their marketing is a bit. Also, the fact that you can take out all of the. I'm pretty sure, didn't they say you could replace parts? You can take out the joystick rings. You can replace them with, like, you can have circular ones or you can have angular ones.
It
So if
also
you're playing a fighting game, you can go in the 8 directions, or you can have a circle one and just use it to look full circle.
has
Um,
the Hall effect or Hall effect. I'm not sure. Joysticks, which are the Steve has talked about these a lot. These are the ones that they connect with magnets.
mhm.
So they actually they're immune or more immune, we should say, at least to stick drift, which is a thing that
Well,
a lot of people have called out as
they
being.
claim
It
it's
says
never,
here, never develop drift in a lifetime. That's what it says.
which is what a lot of the posts have been. Obviously they're jumping on the fact that people do suffer from stick drift, and that is a big talking point of the Switch. Is every time someone brings up the Switch, sort of online in the last couple of years, it's been drift this, drift that, and I think it's impressive it does that. I didn't realize at the time that that it split like that and attached to the side of the Switch. I thought it was just a Pro controller, and I thought, well, the Pro controller doesn't drift. I've never heard of a Pro controller drifting. Um, but yeah, I think this is a
Yeah,
really
you
cool
can use
product.
it
I
either
think
way.
I really want to
You,
kind of replace my Split Pad Pro with them. I just wish that it was the standard ABXY setup.
yeah, it is like the GameCube layout, which I mean, a lot of people are excited about because that is obviously a
Yeah,
beloved controller. But I think the illuminated buttons are also very cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing that's gonna keep me off this is that like I don't really want to get used to a new layout. I'm so used to the Switch button layout now that I think trying to adjust to that would be tough for me.
The fact that you're also jumping between the Steam Deck where ABXY are in different places, and then you're on the PS5 as well, where these
Yeah.
are different places. It's just to then add a fourth one into the mix. Um, I'm going to keep an eye on this the on NYXI and see if they do a NYXI wireless, I don't know, Pro or something, just something that looks more like a normal controller. But yeah, this is very cool, and I well, looking at this picture of it attached to the side of the Switch, it very much looks like the old when the Switch was first revealed and people were like, "Oh, the Joy-Cons do this. Cool. Here's all these things Nintendo could do. They could do all of these cool, unique Joy-Cons that they just never
Yeah.
did."
We talked
So
all
it
about
is.
that
It
last
is.
week.
Yes. Yeah. So it is. It is cool.
In terms of like favorite accessories though, I think like the third party controller that I've used the most is the 8BitDo.
Yeah.
I forget which one it is. It's like the SNES style Pro one. I have it in the
Mhm.
Game Boy color. And I like that one a lot. It's got a great D-pad. It's really good for platformers. I play a lot of retro games on it. Like I beat like Super Mario World on Switch with that. I replayed Sonic 2 when they brought the Sega stuff. I used that just because it's got a nicer D-pad than the one that you're kind of stuck with on the Pro controller, which I think is kind of like the one drawback of that controller in my mind is it just the D-pad's weak, you know. So that's probably my favorite third party controller in terms of like accessories. I'd have to give it to the Ring-Con, because
Oh yeah, great shout.
the Ring-Con when that was like first announced, I was like, what the hell is this thing? Like, why is this a thing? Like, why did they make this? And like, I know that obviously there's the legacy of like fitness with like the Wii board and everything, but like Wii Fit felt like it made sense. And this was a thing where I'm like, it's like a weird JRPG. Like, what even is this? And like, I love Ring Fit Adventure, right? Like the last
Mhm.
2 years we've done
Great.
Ring Fit February. And Steve has already said he doesn't want to do that this year. So I think instead of that, I'm just going to do Ring Fit forever, right? I'm going to just start a thread and start playing Ring Fit again in February. So I think that's the one. Like that's the one like goofy gimmicky accessory that they made for the Switch that I feel like justifies its existence because it's actually good. The game that they made for it is actually good and it works for what it's supposed to do. You know,
Mhm.
whereas like so many of the other accessories that come to mind for me are like dumb gimmick stuff, like Labo, right? Or like
So Labo is actually going to be the one that I talk about.
really? So you're a Labo fan?
Yeah. So
Okay.
so first of all, the controller I think I like the best. Sort of it is this is not Labo. Yeah, I'm just going to do this thing first. The Split Pad
Oh,
Pro
okay.
for me made playing the Switch in handheld mode with friends playing more sort of, I hate the word, but like hardcore games. You know, when we were getting like doing Overwatch LAN sessions. I say LAN sessions, but it was just all of us with our Switches playing Overwatch together, right? Or Monster Hunter, when a bunch of us got together and played Monster Hunter, and we'd have one person on the TV, and we would then just swap as the battery sort of wore down for everyone. There were sort of 3 or 4 of us, so it wasn't like we had 8 people trying to fight for it. But the Split Pad Pro really made that more comfortable and made those long play sessions feel better, and I didn't feel like I was being hampered at all. Like especially
Yeah.
in something like Monster Hunter, where if I'm not playing best and I die, that's affecting the rest of the team. I think the Pokeball Plus is also another little one in there because that was also cool. The fact that you could use it for Let's Go, but also for Pokemon Go.
Such a
But yeah,
shame that that wasn't used more.
yeah,
I feel like the other Pokemon
yeah.
games should have supported it.
I think that that's Pokemon in general. Really, is they have a good idea and they just leave it, and they don't keep doing things.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So the reason I wanted to say Labo is because I feel like Labo got a bit of a bad rap overall, because too many people, when they saw the product, right, of it's a gun or it's a piano or things like that, they see a finished product that's made out of cardboard and they go, why didn't they just make a plastic version of this that just works as is? You slide the Joy-Cons in, whatever. And to that, I say the point of Labo is in the building and the learning and the experimenting of how it all goes together. I picked up the VR Canon for quite cheap a couple of years ago now, and I spent the day building it. And as you're going along, you've got all these sheets of cardboard that starts with a big stack of cardboard you've got, and you're popping all the bits out and you're building it, and you're building a very functional toy. You pull back the cock, or you cock it, whatever. I didn't say that. You cock it and you don't pull back the cock. You
Cock
cock
it
it
and pull it.
and you cock it, and there's something in there that it actually catches an elastic band which pulls it in and then primes the trigger. The Joy-Con that's in there is reading that there's a piece of reflective material moved closer to it, so it knows that you've loaded the thing. You pull the button, which releases the little latch. The thing flies forward, pushing the Joy-Con away, so the game then knows, okay, cool, you fired. And it's not the point of the thing, because the game's pretty average, right? You're just shooting aliens. You're moving around, looking into it. You're shooting things with the cannon. You're spraying water, wherever it is you're doing, right? Playing the game with it is not the point. The point of it is the building
The
of a learning
build.
experience in using understanding how these things work. And they all came with a garage mode in there where you could make your own toys by you'd use basic logic, and you could string things together, and you could say, right, when you press this button on the Joy-Con, or when this Joy-Con does this, or when it recognizes this is in front of it, or when you make a certain shape, if you do like an OK sign or whatever it was that you could do, um, X would happen, and then you would do if ands, you'd log it all together. And the point that it being made out of cardboard is to show that you can do this yourself. You have the tools to do it. Use the hardware for something new. Go out and try something new. And it was supposed to be a way for kids to experiment and use the thing as a toy. But too many people, especially like adults generally, we're
Yes.
seeing a peripheral made of cardboard, thinking, oh, why would I want to use a cardboard? It's just going to break. And I feel like that's the way missed opportunity. It didn't do very well because some of the things they did maybe weren't as interesting or as in depth. Also, it was quite expensive for what it was. The robot one specifically, I remember being very expensive, even though it had loads of moving parts and the way it worked was really clever. And you never had a Joy-Con in your hand, but you were moving these bits of string that made the Joy-Cons move, and it made inside the backpack, and that made the robot respond to your movements. And I think that was so clever, and I think it very much speaks to the Nintendo people like. They like Nintendo experimenting. They like them doing different things,
Yeah.
and I just think it's a
Being wacky
shame.
and weird.
Exactly, I think it's a shame that they didn't want to keep it up, because there were some great ideas in there. And I feel like if it was only cheaper, that that the people might have got on board and maybe understood it more. People just looking at a finished product and judging it on as if it was something else.
Yeah, and I mean, you said like the adult thing. That reminds me so much because it was like a similar narrative around like the Switch Lite, right? Where it's like, who's this for? And it's like, because it's not for me, it's not for anybody, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
to me, like, it's less the idea of Labo that I was critical of and more the execution. Like, it just feels like they didn't. It feels like they kind of threw it out with a couple like ideas that weren't necessarily all the way there, and it showed promise, but then it was kind of like, all right, cool, that was a failed experiment, we're done. It's like, okay, that's a shame. I wish they would have put like, if they were gonna do it, commit to it, do another wave, like try to develop the idea more. But hey, I'm always down for Nintendo to do some weird stuff.
Yeah, me too. Same.
All right, gang. So thank you for joining us here on another episode of Nintendo Noise. This was a fun one, Max.
I had a good time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Fire Emblem. Thanks everybody who wrote in. Banger episode, everybody. Good job. Good job. Round of applause. Round of applause. Round of applause. Golf claps. Join me, Max. Golf claps. Come on.
Oh, sorry. I did a little clap earlier. Maybe you
Just
can edit that in. But yeah.
There we go. Great. Awesome. Good work, everybody. So, if you want to get involved, if you want to write in for the next episode, if you want to show your support, if you want to join the community, if you want to do anything with us here at Flipscreen Games, head over to flipscreen.games. That's the website where you can find all the ways you can get involved all around the web, however you choose to get involved. We very much thank you for tuning into this week's show, for being a member of the community, for writing in, however you did it. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. And, of course, next week, we'll be back again. Hopefully, Steve will be back. Sierra will definitely be back. It'll be a full house. So look forward to it right in, because not a lot going on in the world of Nintendo until Fire Emblem comes out. So hit me with some sauce. Give me something to talk about for next week's show.
Or a surprise direct.
Or a surprise. Hey, here's the thing, though, Max. You say that, and we're going to get rewarded. We're going to push publish on this, and a direct's going to go live. That's going to be what happens. But I'll take it.
Now. Push publish. Don't even finish the episode. Just push publish.
All right, cool. We'll get out of here so you can hear about the next direct. All right, everybody. So for the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week for another episode of Nintendo Noise, everybody. Take it easy. The music got broken because of... wait, hold on. Maybe I can still play it. Let's see. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.